It's another trophyless season for Mikel Arteta at Arsenal. He's been there 6 years, spent £800 million with just the FA Cup to his name. Harry, I've seen over the last couple of days you reacting to some Arsenal fans who are suggesting that Arteta should be out of the job because of this season. I know that you disagree with that. Do you think people are just being far too harsh on him?
Yeah, I do, because I think people have forgotten where the club was when he picked them up. And I think that's really, really important. And for a club to be successful, there's so many moving parts and there's so many people that need to do their jobs well. It isn't just about one man. You know, he needs his players to perform. He needs a bit of luck, a bit of rub of the green when it comes to injuries and things like that. And I certainly don't think he's had that. And I think more recently, not at the beginning of his tenure, but certainly more recently, I feel like he's been let down a little bit in the transfer windows. And maybe that was partly down to Edu's departure. Obviously, he left ahead of the January window, which was not ideal. And I don't think at Arsenal they necessarily saw that coming, or at least I think they were surprised by the timing of it, certainly. So I think to say that he should be gone is harsh for me. I think he's got a track record of having picked up this team and completely turned it around. And yes, there will be mistakes that he's made along the way, but we've got to remember it's his first job as well. Now, people will push back on that and say, yeah, but, you know, Arsenal are too big a football club to be sort of allowing Mikel Arteta to learn and train on the job. And I get that, but I just think people have got such short memories. And the fact that we're sitting here, the day after recording this, Arsenal have been knocked out of a Champions League semi-final, means that the emotion around the place right now is a bit raw. But actually, the fact that we were there is probably the main takeaway.
I mean, for me, it's a little bit more complicated because I think there's obviously been a huge amount of progress made. And I think every season Arsenal get better at something. They get better in some certain aspects. And I do completely agree. I think the last two windows have been really poor for Arsenal. It was very, very clear what they needed. And the board didn't go and get Arteta them. So I feel like off the back of going out to probably the eventual winners in the Champions League semi-final, is not the right time to be calling for Mikel Arteta's head. The thing for me is, it's a lot of money spent to get just an FA Cup. And there is obviously this process, and it's always been trust the process. But how long do you give that? I remember this time last year having the same conversation and saying, is it trophy or bust for Arteta next season? I'm sat here again today. Is it trophy or bust for Arteta next season?
I would say next season would be the one in terms of, but it's all contextual, right? Arsenal could finish fourth and win the Carabao Cup, and that's not going to be enough. Or Arsenal could finish sixth and win the Champions League, and so it's just so many different ways to win a trophy. I just think that with this Arsenal team, they've just got too many good players that have yet to pick up silverware or lift major silverware. You look at a player like Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, William Saliba. Sometimes players start to get antsy, and the reason why Liverpool managed to keep those players was because, I've said it before, they pacified them with winning trophies. Here's a Champions League in 2019. Here's a league title in 2020. Here's an FA Cup and League Cup in 2021. It's you have to win trophies to keep your best players. And for Arteta, we have to be honest with what the job that he's done. He's done a very, very good job. And here's the blueprint for a lot of teams that are looking to maybe give their managers time. The reason why there's a large section of Chelsea fans that are Maresca in is because they point to Arsenal and say, look at the time they gave at Arteta and look at what he's done. He's progressed every season as well in the league. Eighth, fifth, second, and this year it's either going to be second or third, in my opinion. And so there hasn't really been that steep decline, but I think maybe the Arsenal fans or the football fans that are calling for his head right now are calling for it before the decline happens, because next season is do or die. You've got to win a major trophy. Otherwise, I think some players will get antsy. I think the board will start to get antsy. And I think Mikel Arteta will recognise in himself that this is a team that I've built, but maybe I'm not the guy to take it over the line and win a major trophy.
I mean, the problem is that as Kweku said, I think the Carabao Cup and probably even an FA Cup won't satisfy that many Arsenal fans or satisfy that many people who are calling for Arteta's head or saying that he hasn't done a great job. And I think the problem that you then have is that Manchester City will be better next season. Liverpool will actually spend this window and be better. I think the Premier League will be at a better level and it will be harder to win it next season than this. And then I just look at Arsenal and I think they're going to have to put in quite a lot of money in this summer window for them to compete again. And if they do that and Arteta still falls short, as an Arsenal fan who has seen the unbelievable progress he's made, how long are you willing to give him before he wins one of those major 2 trophies?
Again, it depends on the context, but I think if you get to the end of next season and he hasn't done it, then you can start to ask the question, and that question would be fair. I'm not going to sit here and say that if he doesn't win a trophy next season, I want him sacked, because I don't think in football you can look that far ahead, and I don't think you should look that far ahead. And that's why I take issue with people sort of dishing out ultimatums, like if you don't achieve this by X date, you're out. Football doesn't work like that. You know, you go back to the first year he seriously challenged for the Premier League title. I honestly believe that if he didn't lose William Saliba and Thomas Partey in the last 6 weeks, Arsenal probably go on and become champions. And then you're talking about what an unbelievable, title win that was out of the blue. The following season, Arsenal were unbelievable. In the second half of the season, they dropped points in 2 games, and they fell short to an unreal Manchester City side. And in 99 of 100 seasons prior, that run wins you the league. So I'm not making excuses for him. I'm flipping the argument round the other way, right? I'm looking at it through a different lens, and I'm saying, is it what he's done, or is it circumstances around him that have contributed to him being unable to get over the line? Because it's all well and good saying the fact is they didn't win it, but why didn't they win it?
I do think that the top managers overcome those obstacles. Though.
Agreed,
I think there are many managers who've had injuries before and have overcome it.
But so that first season that I referenced when Arsenal challenged for the title, that squad was nowhere near ready to win a Premier League title. They were fortunate that year that people stayed fit. When those injuries occurred, again, it's not an excuse, but it exposed the fact that the squad wasn't ready. So then the point I would make on that is, yeah, managers have overcome that, but most of the managers that overcome it because they've got a squad that can deal with that. And if you, again, it goes back to where Arsenal come from. They didn't have it. They had to strip it right back to build it again. And it was in that period where they fell short because they didn't have the players. Again, it's not an excuse, but it's like, yeah, a manager can overcome that, but then you got to look at, right, did the manager overcome that because he came up with a bit of tactical genius? Did he overcome it because he changed the system? Did he overcome it because he outthought an opposition manager? Or did he overcome it, did he fail to overcome it because he had to bring Rob Holding in and had no other option? So it's just about analysing the circumstances around it.
It's tough for Arteta, right? Because if you look at the history of the Premier League, most of the managers that have won it have won leagues elsewhere or won leagues before in their career and then come to the Premier League, and that's kind of been the icing on top of the cake, and that's where they've gained their exposure and become the greatest managers of all time. Look at Mourinho, look at Klopp, look at Guardiola. Arteta's learning on the job, and we're seeing all the warts in real time. This is the Premier League. Arsenal, one of the most popular teams, not just in the league, but in the world. So every single decision is critiqued to its minutiae. It's like, did he play the right midfielder in this game on Tuesday against Bournemouth? And it's like, most other managers do their learning elsewhere and then come to the Premier League, and that's where they can really make their mark. And we have to understand that Arteta hasn't got that bank of experience, but we have to deal with the reality of the situation. He is managing Arsenal, and so that does come with expectation. And I'm a Chelsea fan. It's now been 8 years since Chelsea have won the league. It's been 21 years since Arsenal won the league. And I think with Arsenal fans, there's a clear kind of divide. There's some Arsenal fans that view Arteta as being the disciple or being the Messiah, and nothing he says is wrong and nothing he does is wrong. But then there are some Arsenal fans that have seen the Invincibles and seen Arsenal win trophies and maybe expect a little bit more. I think the truth lies somewhere in between. I think he's an incredibly talented manager, and that's what it is. He's talented. He hasn't yet shown us what he can do at the highest level in terms of getting over the line. Jurgen Klopp was at Mainz for 6 or 7 years, and then he went to Borussia Dortmund, and it took him 3 years to win the league at Dortmund. And then he came to Liverpool and took him 5 years to win the league at Liverpool. This is Arteta's 5th or 6th season being a manager.
That point that you've just made about the divide in the fans, that's why there's a division in the opinion. Because if you, and it won't be the case with everybody, but I guarantee you, if you did a survey and you said, are you Arteta out or Arteta in? All the people that are Arteta out will be of a generation that remember the Invincibles, who still have their standards up here, but have refused to acknowledge that this club has not won the league for 21 years. We're not that team anymore. We're not that club anymore. We've gone way back from that. And it takes time to build up to that. Again, Liverpool, some people would argue, are the biggest club in this country. How long did it take them to win a league? 30 years. It can happen, and the years go on and on and on, and it can get hard. And every year that you don't do it, it gets harder and harder and harder.
The problem for me a little bit with Arteta is, like, I think on the pitch there's obviously been progress. I think people have said trust the process, and there has been a very clear process. I do think he lets himself down a little bit. I think mentality-wise, he uses way too many excuses when he doesn't get over the line, and I think he's done that since he's got in. I don't think he's ever taken a huge amount of responsibility for his own failings, which I don't like, and I don't think that a lot of the overly successful managers do that. And I do think that's probably why he's a little bit more under scrutiny now than maybe he should be for a young, up-and-coming manager.
I get where you're coming from, and I mentioned when we were speaking earlier that I was frustrated with his comments post-PSG. But at the same time, I'm listening to someone who's just walked into a room 10 minutes after he's just crashed out of a Champions League semi-final. And I think you can forgive a manager for being a little bit overly emotional. And the other important point is what he says front-facing with the media the same thing he's saying in the dressing room? Because I don't believe, given the way we know he operates, that he's going into the dressing room after the game and saying, guys, we were the best team, blah, blah, blah. It's not your fault. Don't worry about it. I think he's going in there and giving them a right dressing down. I really do. Because, look, I've worked on Arsenal games a lot over the last few years as a radio reporter. And what that means a lot of the time is you're hanging around in the tunnel area after the game. You're waiting for the managers to come over and do their interviews. And I'm not saying like I've ever seen anything like dramatic, but when he's in a mood, you can see he's in a mood. The way he storms up and down the tunnel, the way he sort of barges open the interview room doors. Mikel Arteta's a really fiery person. He was never like that as a player, and it's weird to me that he's like this as a manager. But I don't believe that he keeps his cool in the changing room and delivers the same messages he delivers publicly. So, you know, I think he doesn't help himself sometimes with his comments. I agree with you. He could wind it in a little bit at certain points and not be so forceful on certain things. But I just, I'm not refused, but I just don't believe that he's that guy in the changing room.
Also, just real quickly, those things are more palatable when you win the trophies, right? I remember Jurgen Klopp, and it's all forgotten about now because he left Liverpool, and he's now, his time in England is viewed as being this golden kind of ray of sunshine. He was so petulant and refused to take accountability. He was moaning about kickoff times. Jose Mourinho, the man I love more than anybody in football, is the same way. I've seen Pep Guardiola do it. The reason why he can stomach it is because those guys have won trophies and proved it. Like I mentioned, Arteta is learning on the job. He hasn't had half the amount of experience that those guys have had. If Arsenal start winning trophies, those excuses or those things that he does in press conferences will eventually become iconic. Do you know what I mean? When Mourinho does it, or when Klopp does it, or when Pep does it, it's viewed in a different lens for Arteta because Arsenal have not yet won. And we saw it on social media. People couldn't wait for Arsenal not to win. And I'm not an Arsenal fan, but you saw it. Every single football fan had something loaded, whether it's a picture of a croissant, whether it's a picture of the Eiffel Tower. Everyone had something for Arsenal. I saw Spurs fans doing that. I said, you need to be careful because you guys have got your day coming. So I think that let's cut him some slack. He's been a very good manager, but I do think next season he does need to win a trophy.
I think we've all agreed, haven't we, that next season, if he doesn't win a trophy, there are conversations to be had. But let us know in the comments below if you think it's trophy or bust for Arteta next season.